Welcome to the 7 p.m. It's in the Book Literature Study Meeting. My name is Eileen, and I am an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Join me in a moment of silent meditation to reflect on why we are here, followed by the Serenity Prayer. Serenity Prayer? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to handle the difference. And we have asked Matt to read the preamble. And now I get to introduce Meredith, our discussion leader.
Hey, everybody. My name's Meredith. I'm an alcoholic. Good to be here on Master Sunday Outside Issue. Okay. All right. So we're studying the textbook, and we're in the beginning. And I was taught to read this and find myself in these pages. I was told that the more I could identify with the problem, the more I could be assured the solution would work for me. So very early on, they give us very important information to gather and to determine whether or not we're in the right book and the right meeting. Title page tells us the first promise, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Recovered is past tense. And then it tells us in the foreword to the first edition what we've recovered from, because we're not cured. But what it says is on XIII is we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So right off the bat, they're telling us we're seemingly mentally and physically ill. And if we could not be recovered from that, we'd have an empty room. So we're seemingly hopeless, but we can recover from this state of mind. And then they're going to say, especially if we follow precisely how they have recovered, which is in italics. All right. And then the forward to the second edition really shows the growth of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it talks about how the founder on XVI, Bill Wilson, he was sober for about 6 months and was trying to share the message with other people, but was talking about the necessary spiritual experience. He wasn't talking about alcoholism, the progressively fatal malady. So people were not identifying. They're like, I don't want a spiritual experience. I want to quit drinking. So the doctor, so forth, who treated him said, explain the physical problem first. They can relate more to that and then tell them the rest. And so when he got to Akron and a business venture failed, he suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he would have to carry this message, which was a whole new approach for him. He thought he was saving everybody else, and now he realizes, wow, I need to pass this on to save my own ass. And so he said he must carry this message to other alcoholic. And so sure enough, he carried the message to Dr. Bob Smith, sobered up, never to drink again. So it proved his theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. And it also says on XBII at the top of the page, it also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. Vital, essential for life. It is essential that if we are alcoholics of the type that are described in this book, it's essential that we pass this on. And it says it will lead to permanent recovery. A whole lot less precarious than not drinking one day at a time. And then it talks about how other people that were friends of AA became in contact with Bill and a few of the other people, and they began to buy in. They gave a dinner at to the Rockefellers, and then Jack Alexander, who was he was like, the Morley Schaefer of the day. No one knows Morley Schaefer anymore. Right. He's on 60 Minutes now. He was like the 60 Minutes person, whoever that is, but he was in writing.
Famous newscaster.
So everybody listened to what he said. And so, but with the help of these people outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, they became very popular and very quickly. And it talks about how by the end of 1941, we were 8,000 strong. And that was only 2 years after, that was only 6 years after they got sober, but only 2 years after the book came out. And then they talk about how the principles that we evolved for how we stay sober were then evolved into principles for how the fellowship stays alive. And a principle is a code for conduct. It's not the law, but it's a highly suggested code for conduct. Right? And then the forward to the third edition reminds us that Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps, are the same everywhere. In Spanish, in French, in 65 other languages, Alcoholics Anonymous is the same. And that's why in the 4th edition, it talks about what has kept the integrity of this message the same over all these years is the literature, particularly the big books. That was the AA seed. And when that was planted, people started getting sober where it was planted. And then we got into the doctor's opinion, which is the formal expression of a professional judgment. So this was a very highly regarded opinion, which gave some validity to Alcoholics Anonymous. And this was written by Dr. Silkworth, who had treated 50,000 alcoholics. Now, maybe some of those are retreads. Maybe it's 35,000 and a couple of, a couple of be-backs, as we say in sales, right? I'll be back. And it talks about on the first page of the doctor's opinion, XXB, that as part of Bill's rehabilitation, he commenced to present these conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them they must do likewise with still others, and that this is the basis of our fellowship. So not to be confused with hitting a meeting or hitting a meeting on Zoom. It's one-on-one work with another alcoholic, taking them through these steps so that they have the essential psychic change, which is what we're talking about here as we get caught up. So the doctor's theory was that we have an allergy to alcohol, which is unexplained by the laws of nature, although now there's probably a lot more scientific stuff about it. I haven't been to treatment, so I don't know what the latest is, but they can give you a whiteboard and all kinds of stuff. They explain acetone and the processing it and all that, but none of that made any impact on whether or not I was going to drink. I can have all the knowledge in the world, but what I needed was an essential personality change to take that obsession off the table. Because I can read a lot of books and go to a lot of meetings, but if I don't go through the process that changes me inwardly, I am certain to drink again. So the doctor's opinion also talks about this movement is unselfish and based in a spiritual remedy. So spiritual can be very broad at first, just a power greater than you. Right? And altruism, unselfishness. Because our main problem is we just think too much about ourselves. We think too much about ourselves. It's just too much. And this gets us out of our heads. We then get to XXVIII, which breaks down that allergy, talks about the phenomenon of craving occurs once we drink. And I love the second full paragraph of XXVIII. And it's one of the sentences that stuck with me as I read this book. It says, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. Meaning, people have told us, oh, you're such a talented person, or you're so bright. If only you didn't drink like a fish and wreck your life, But I knew those things. Telling me that didn't help. It only made it worse. I'm like, I know I'm a loser because I can't stop drinking. All of their appeals to me just were not enough. And so what it says here, the message which can interest and hold us must have depth and weight. It must reach into the inside of our soul where this lives. And in order to do that, we really need to connect with other alcoholics who can explain that, who can talk about their experience, and you can relate. All right. And then it talks about nothing has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. So that's like 4 times in the doctor's opinion, he's mentioning this altruistic movement, and that's really at the core of this thing. And then it talks about that we drink because we like the effect, even though it's injurious. We're going to say this time it's not going to be as bad. All the excuses we tell ourselves, but we drink because we like the effect. And for me, the effect was I could exhale, and I felt like I was at ease finally because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. And it talks about if I can't have alcohol, I am restless, irritable, and discontented. And alcohol treats that emotional state. But I've got to find something else that will treat it, which is the 12 steps, this personality change. Because what I'm looking for is a sense of ease and comfort. That's really what I'm looking for. I'll tell you stuff like, I just want to chill. It's Friday. It's happy hour. In 6 hours, I'll be with someone I don't know in a place of Charlie Town I don't know. Tomorrow I'll want to kill myself, but for right now, it's Friday happy hour. And so this is really what I'm looking for, this sense of ease and comfort. And it tells us that unless we can experience this entire psychic change, there's very little hope of our recovery. Doesn't say there's no hope. If you want that loophole, there it is. Good luck with that. But it does remind us 3 times on this page that we need an essential psychic change. And psychic is of the mind and the soul, which goes back to that deep I was talking about. Deep where our alcoholism lives, where we don't talk about it too much. And so and then it says we can experience this entire psychic change only by following a few simple rules, which are the concepts behind these steps. So we are in the middle of XXIX, and we're going to start with men have cried out. Does anybody have anything they want to say before we start?
Okay. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if the doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it is often not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. The advocate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable. We physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date, favorable to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which causes men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight.
Okay. So, interestingly, in sincere appeal, there have been times when I've told myself, I got this. Next time it'll be better. I got this. And other times I'm like, I'm doomed. I really need help. So it says here that men cry out in sincere and despairing appeal. When we're down, there's an opportunity there, right? And they're sincere. I know that, I don't know how many times I said, starting Monday, I'm not drinking. I'm not drinking till Friday. Drinking till Friday. And by Monday, I'm having this tennis match in my head about how we're going to drink at 5 o'clock. And so I am sincere, but it falls by the wayside. And, and sometimes for me, like this guy says, I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. Sometimes I say, I have nothing to live for. And if I don't stop, I won't care about living. So 2 sides of the same coin. And then it says, if doctors are honest with themselves, they're inadequate. They talk about needing this moral psychology and they talk about the essential psychic change, but they know that they can't facilitate it. They know what we need. They can't produce it in us. We need an effective mental defense against the first drink, and we need some deflation at depth. And sometimes psychiatrists can get us a little deflated, but we bounce back all the time. The ego is revivable. Even when we're at our lowest of lows, you think it can never get this low again. And I've learned that the bottom has a basement. And so it talks about this essential psychic change. And that's why it goes on to say, though they've had, some success with recovery, they say they've made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach, which is cognitive therapy. And because it relies on your mind to work properly, that doesn't work for us because we have a peculiar mental twist. So it's going to tell us on the next page the types for whom this cognitive therapy doesn't work. And then it talks about, again, this allergy. And he's just driving home this idea that it's not just a problem of mental control, because once we drink, it's a physical problem. So once we drink, we're drinking to try to overcome a craving that we can't overcome. So once we give in to the mental obsession, it's the allergy that carries us through. And I noticed in my drinking life of 28 years, the more I drank, the stronger the obsession got. I used to be able to go until Friday, just drink on the weekends when I was 50, right? And then by the time I'm 18, I'm finding a reason to drink in the middle of the week. And then when I'm in college, I'm drinking on Mondays, and I'm drinking on the weekends, then I'm drinking on Wednesdays because there's a band, then I'm drinking on Thursday because it's so close to Friday. And then I'm drinking on Sunday night because I can't stand being in my room on Sunday night because now I'm really restless. So the allergy fuels the obsession, and the obsession fuels the allergy. But the problem is alcohol brings these results, the sense of ease and comfort quickly, but the 12 steps are a little more slowly. And that's tough for us. Yeah. And then they're going to give us these classifications of alcoholics that don't respond to the normal psychological approach.
Great. Okay. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision.
Okay, so the decision they don't make is, I need to stop drinking. I'm going to make a resolution. I might quit for a little while. The decision, I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink, And then the going on the wagon for keeps. I don't know when I stopped going on the wagon for keeps. And I start to say, I'm not going to drink for 2 weeks. And then I say, well, I'm not going to drink for a week. And the last time I didn't drink for a week was 1980, the summer of 1980. And that was my go-to for many years. I quit once in 1980 for a whole week. And how many years ago was that? 46?
Let's not count. Let's not count.
Yeah, I was mathing.
Yeah. Okay, there is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There is the manic-depressive type who is, perhaps, the least understood by his friends and about whom the whole chapter could be written. Then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. There are often able, intelligent, friendly people. Now, how many of us think we're there?
Well, it's nice that the doctor says it about us. It's not like we say it. So it's got to be true.
We're all in that category.
That's it.
All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed.
Okay, so some people just give up and kill themselves. Sometimes we do it by accident, and sometimes we do it on purpose. The only problem is we can't take it back. It's a very permanent solution to a temporary problem. There's the classification of alcoholics, which I love how all the doctors are familiar with the psychopaths. They all know them. Emotionally unstable, all right? We already talked about that. Then the next paragraph, the type of man who's unwilling to admit he cannot take a drink. That was me for a long time. There's got to be a way that I can have a couple. I mean, to quit entirely is just so radical. Interestingly, I just noticed this sentence. He plans various ways of drinking. Normal drinkers don't do that. The farthest they plan is, we're going out on Saturday night, let's Uber. Like, I'll drive. So, and then changes his brand or environment. I did that. And then there's the type who always believes after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take and drink without danger. That was also me. I really thought if I could stop for a period of time, which as we all know now was 1 week, 46 years ago, that I would be able to reset my internal mechanism and I would drink normally. That I wouldn't drink to black out and that it wouldn't ramp up. But alcoholism is progressive whether we drink or not. And then manic depressive, that was my brother. He definitely treated his manic depression with alcohol. He was never diagnosed, but we all diagnosed him. And then entirely normal in every respect. I think of Roland Hazard. He might have been him, statesman, lawyer, high achiever, except when he gets drunk and then he punches out nurses. But this is the important thing, and this is really what we need to hear, especially if we're going to a lot of meetings and we're hearing stories about, I drank a whole handle every day. I spilled more alcohol than you ever drank. things like that. It says here we only have one symptom in common. One. Our behavior patterns vary. Our brands vary. The frequency with which we drink varies. I know a lady in my neighborhood. She's a binge drinker. She only drinks 3 times a year. And when she does, she loses all control of how much she drinks. All right. So it says they cannot start drinking without developing that phenomenon of craving, which presses us to have more even when we don't want to. Even when we've decided beforehand we're only going to have 2 or we're only going to have 3 because it's an important occasion. And then it says this phenomenon, which means unexplained by laws of nature. All right. Although, like I said, now there's probably plenty of chemical laws out there that I haven't read, is the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. We are set apart. And it says, it, meaning the allergy, it has never been eradicated, erased, cured, whatever, by any treatment with which we are familiar. And it's still not. All right? It's never been permanently eradicated. And they say the only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence, meaning if you don't want to trigger the allergy, don't drink. And we know how much fun that is. Trying not to drink, trying not to drink. I'm not going to drink. I'm a winner. Not drink. And I'm going to go to a meeting. And tomorrow I'm going to wake up feeling like a winner. Go to another meeting. I really thought AA was about going to meetings and talking about how you want to drink, but you can't. And you have to go every day because you might be struck drunk. I didn't know that the obsession can be removed through these 12 steps. I had no idea. And unfortunately, some of the stuff on TV doesn't really lend itself to that conclusion either. We need just a few more drunks running the TV industry and we'll be good. Because you of them out there, they've thrown in their 2 cents word. It's this idea about having a psychic change. And that's the only thing that's going to. And then the last sentence on this page, and then we'll open it up. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. The debate that we're having back then was, it is not an allergy, it's a personality flaw. You have a weak character, you're a lowlife, and if you had good breeding and good character, you'd be able to control how much you drink. And the doctor's saying, that's not it anymore. That's out. That doesn't make sense. What makes sense is this physical predisposition, right? So they debated for a while. And then Bill Wilson says in his expanded story and Pass It On page 102, he says, alcohol could no more be defeated by willpower than tuberculosis. All right? So that's a good way to frame it up, right? That changes the game. Now, I didn't like the idea that it was a disease. I got a friend who's in AA now, probably 15 years, and I remember when he wasn't at AA, and he said about, oh, AA, that's nonsense. You got to have a higher power. And they called it with Z's. And he really had a problem with that. But I like illness because a lot of people in my family have been mentally ill. And I can see mental illness in the way I thought about my drinking. I knew my physical reaction to alcohol was different. I knew I didn't drink like normal people. I never kidded myself into thinking I drank like normal people. But I didn't. It really put 2 and 2 together for me when I realized it's a mental illness. I thought, oh, I got plenty of that in my family. I can get down with that. And that made me feel better. My brand of insanity is alcoholism. And that's why it says the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics marked by longevity and habit, even a binge drinker is chronic. So marked by longevity and habit, we're going to be doomed. And doomed means to come to a ruinous fate. Not really good.
Not good.
Who wants to talk?
Eileen, alcoholic. And, this was really, really something for me, this whole allergy thing. I had no clue. None. I was going on that weak will, bad character, just terrible person, constantly. But when I came in here and not even the first time, I had a father who quit drinking. And, I read that book, Living Sober, and it said not to trigger the allergy. So I basically stopped drinking by never having the first drink. It was the first drink that was the problem. And it worked. I mean, when I didn't have the first drink, I didn't have to battle it. But it didn't mean that I was happy, joyous, and free by any means. But I wasn't drinking or thinking about it as much as there was a period where it was off the table then for me. But I was restless, irritable, and discontented. And then luckily for me, I did drink again because they tell you that that's going to happen if you don't have a solution other than just not having the first drink. But this whole allergy thing, it really comforted me. It really helped me not feel so horrible about myself. And because when I drank again and I came back here, it was tough. It scared me. I was kind of at the end of myself, which I think is a condition that we have to get in here and be teachable, and met a girl who helped me. And at that point, because of my low point, I was ready to do anything she said. And, grabbed onto it. And, I'm really lucky, but the grace of God, I don't know why. There's a lot of people that come in and out of here. I don't know why I've been lucky enough to stay. But I do believe I'm willing to give back because it does say that. I mean, that really creeped me out a little too, that you'll make wonderful friends here and you'll, kumbaya and all this kind of stuff. I thought, I really don't want to have friends with everybody here. And when it's kind of funny now, they are my friends and I really look forward to seeing them. And it's just how different it all is. Anyway, thanks. That's me.
Thank you.